thank you so much for just answering my cold call on Instagram. And it was Ian and I are obviously huge horror fans,
Great.
and we're horror fans that love. We talked to Joshua Petrino from Terrifier 3 team, the visual effects supervisor, and
Yeah, they're having a moment.
we were talking. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like horror's having a great year this year, and especially with the Substance as well. We were talking about prosthetics and visual effects and everything like that, and the marriage between the different styles. And I went to see Smile 2. I think it was just after opening weekend, and scale wise, it's massive. I think we can all appreciate that. And Naomi Scott's performance, the direction, I think it was like she was just like I for me, it's almost like how I think about Demi Moore in The Substance. It's like a performance for a career, career highlight.
Even having seen how good she was on set every day did not prepare me for how that came together with her. How absolutely like it blew me away. And I, of course, knew she was talented. I saw her doing it in front of me all the time, every day. But when fully assembled, it absolutely just knocked my socks off. It was incredible. She was incredible.
Wow. Absolutely. We'll definitely be circling back to Smile and Smile 2. What was your kind of first experience, and where did you kind of start to appreciate horror? I know you're a huge Nightmare on Elm Street fan.
That was.
But where was it when you were younger? Like, what was your first kind of experience? Because for me, it was my eldest brother. He introduced Video Nasties with Child's Play when I was very young, and I watched those far too young. But what was where did that start for you?
The far too young seems to be the trend. I think I was 7 or 8 years old. On the East Coast, well, in New York and New Jersey specifically, in the 80s, there was a station called WPIX, and all through October, every night, they would show a edited for TV horror movie from 8 to 10, and I used to beg my parents to watch it, and they just gave up because it was the 80s. So I would watch these movies, and that was my first introduction to Freddy and Jason, and I think it was Halloween's 1, 2, and 3 at that point. 4 hadn't hit it yet. A couple other ones they would throw in, like The Fog, a couple of random films that didn't quite fit the slasher genre, but they would pepper in some amazing classics, The Shining. So yeah, just the entire month of October, and then slowly but surely, I chiseled away at them to let me actually rent the movies from our local video store. So the actual full bore films.
Experience. And what was the because I am a huge component of loving video stores, walking through video stores. I mean, I'm exactly the same as you with watching, edited for. I mean, there was so many movies. It wasn't until I saw it on DVD in the early 2000s that I realized that there was more to the movie because I had been watching the taped TV version. I didn't realize that Beetlejuice said the F word years after the fact of seeing it, because when he'd kick the tree down, it cut, and that's when you did get to see it. Whereas the going to the video store, especially the smaller sort of family-owned convenience store type video stores that have the smaller sections. So I would and the new release movies, they had a couple of them. So when they went very quickly, you had to rent something old. You had to look at something older, and of course, for the one that we had, they had the adult section as well that was sort of peppered beside the horror section, so you could sort of steal glances at it. But there's something about those VHS horror movies, especially the low budget ones, where a lot of the marketing money went into a fancy cover, or they would put a gore scene. I remember like the Day of the Dead, on the back had the guy's guts getting right there on the box, and I thought, I've never seen anything like this. And did you have an experience like that with your
absolutely
video store?
Box art was king, to the point I'll remember box art more than I will the movies themselves. This just came up in conversation with some buddies recently. I can't remember the name of the film now, but they showed, I saw this movie, and I was like, wait, I know that one. And all I knew was the cover art. Had never seen the film, but that cover art was emblazoned in my memory. One that for years, The Mutilator, I remember that box art, crystal clear. Chopping Mall was one that always stood out to me, especially because it had nothing to do with the movie.
Yeah.
There was just this cool glove with spikes on it, and so I was like, that wasn't in the. I had no idea that movie was about killer mall robots. Um,
Yeah, teens in a mall. Yeah, yeah.
Whoop, that's me. Um, so yeah, box art.
That's okay.
Box art was that was the fun of it. You would just go in and there were rows and rows. Mine was called We Got Movies, and just a little non-chain video store in town. And yeah, I rated the horror section at least twice a week.
Yeah, that
And it's such a great
yeah.
time at that time for horror movies because, you know, really the pinnacle of the 80s, specifically with practical effects, you know, and that time, I think I'm so grateful to have been sort of born in the 80s, but raised in the 90s to get that era, but then be able to go back and get all those really great early 80s, you know, practical monster effect movies. And, you know, even Temple of Doom, you know, I remember seeing, I loved Indiana Jones, but I was like, this seems like a horror movie. This is not indie fighting Nazis. These are dudes ripping
Yeah, that
hearts
scared the
out.
hell out of me.
And there's something bigger here. Yeah, yeah, me too. And a lot of people I talk to are like, oh, Temple of Doom is, you know, obviously it's Raiders or, you know, Last Crusade, which is incredible. But I
Yeah.
hold such a, a candle to Temple of Doom because of those terrifying
Yeah.
practical effects and Molaram and, and the heart closed. And I thought, what is going on here? And Indiana Jones does
The
it
80s. I
all.
don't know that there will ever be a decade as notable as the 80s. Just, I mean, it's easy for us to say that we grew up and that was it,
Absolutely.
but just you look at the classics that came out from that decade, and of course every generation has its amazing movies, but the 80s has
Yep.
all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even your background, you know, and the people that are seeing it, I mean, it's regardless of what any of those projects are from, it just reminds me of classic 80s monsters, you know what I mean? And then, you know, you literally are making these now, you know, it's just so incredible. What a job that you have. It's so
It can
amazing.
be a lot of fun.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
where did it start? What was the kind of first thing? Like, a cinematographer might see something early on, or like when they're much younger, and see a shot from a David Lean film, or something quite epic that might strike a thing for me. But for me personally, it was like an edit. When I realized how, because my background's in editing more than anything else, and I started to appreciate that when I was younger. Like, what's this? How's it put together? What was the first kind of effect or makeup that you saw that really, so when you first started to think about it slightly more than just a creature?
I mean, the first one that truly grabbed me was Thriller, but I was a little too young to know what was going on.
Yeah.
And MTV famously ran, a 30-minute behind the scenes special on it. So that was the first time I had seen anything of the sort, but was still absolutely terrified of the long form video. So uh, I can't say it was that one because I was too scared to really get into it. So it was the
Yeah.
1-2 punch to my very young brain of Return of the Jedi and then Ghostbusters, both of which had TV specials, um, and just loaded to the gills with monsters and creatures and ghosts. And those two on my 6-year-old brain, just that did it for me.
Yeah, it's quite a thing, when you have that kind of almost like light bulb moment about something you like. And what my favorite thing from especially the Thriller video is almost the first stage of his makeup where he's got
Yeah.
gaunt and he's completely different. That's the scariest thing for me. It's really scary, quite effective. Um, yeah, so it's an incredible process. And like Joshua, when we were talking about Terrifier 3, there's actually a Ghostbusters connection there because he showed his work to some of the special effects team, and then he got his first gig. I think it was not Hatchet; it was one of slightly earlier than that, and
Yes.
it was an amazing step. So, what was the kind of, because obviously you've got quite an extensive field of work. What was
Oh,
the
yes.
what was the first kind of step, or how did you progress from appreciating horror and loving it to doing your own makeup? Were you kind of doing your own makeup, or How did that kind of get started?
I mean, I think that was all of us. Anyone that most people that wound up in this business started, doing themselves, doing their friends. Me and my best friend in
Mm-hmm.
third grade with our giant shoulder-mounted VHS backpack camera would make silly little
Yeah,
movies. Um,
Wick.
using wet toilet paper and food coloring to make gore things. Just we didn't know
yeah,
anything, and until we discovered Fangoria a few years later, we had no means to learn anything back in those days. We just didn't know that resources existed. As I got older, I found books that were put out. Dick Smith had some amazing stuff out there. There were a couple DIY horror books and a couple, legitimate makeup study books. So things like that came more and more into my view. But to start with, yeah, just me and my pals messing around with camcorders.
yeah. It sounds like I just had a flashback to John Landis when he was doing. I think it was Schlock, and I think he did that with Rick
Yes.
Baker, and he was just like did that early on, and it's really fascinating. Like I think a lot of filmmakers, a lot of advice filmmakers give is just go out and shoot something, and that is so true because you can talk about these things, until the cows come home, but unless you
Mm-hmm.
actually practice or do these, go out and make something, you don't give yourself the opportunity to discover what your art form is.
It's true. It's
Um,
anytime I'm contacted by a young artist or a student. And that's what you do. You cold call. Hi, I'm this person. I'm looking to get into an effect shop, and then what can I do? What can I like? What are my first steps? And besides the functional advice of study anatomy, study digital technology, all that, and then
yeah,
just do it. Like find a couple willing faces
Yeah,
that will let you do something on them once a week, twice a week, and just start doing it. Like regardless of how terrible it is, you'll learn more from doing it and messing it up than you ever will from just sitting around thinking and talking about it.
absolutely. We live in such an insane time now where you literally can go on YouTube or the internet and get a
Yeah.
tutorial that somebody's made a tutorial about how to do something, and there's such a resource. And in a lot of ways, I have embraced technology so much as a filmmaker myself. Obviously, it has changed and allowed me to be able to do it, without having to worry about
Hmm.
film and larger production costs and that. But there was something about growing up sort of in an offline era where it was just
Yeah.
imagination, and I was also a huge VHS guy, and I would edit VHS to VHS. And so you didn't have AI, you didn't have the internet, you just had your imagination. And I, toilet paper and food coloring, it's like an awesome way to make gore. It's like I'll still use some of that today, with certain ways. Like if you're in a quick bind, and there's something about that. And I think younger people nowadays, it's like there's so much information that it really sort of pulls away from them actually having to go and do something because they're just inundated with it
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
time, or people doing it for the wrong reasons and getting into it. And so I think that's such a powerful thing where, yeah, also those backpack VHS cameras are incredible.
I mean, for
Like there's
the negative side of that is for all the resources there are, on Facebook or social media, there are groups that are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of artists strong, and you'll get a lot of people
yeah,
asking very basic questions, and it's the shame of it is, okay, so your first instinct was not to try it out, it was to just come on here and
yeah,
ask someone else to tell you how to do
yeah,
it. I feel like that we've lost a lot of that let me go figure it out for myself, and if I absolutely can't figure it out, then I'm going to go seek some help.
sure,
And you know all of us ask for help from time to time, of course, but I think that we've lost a little bit of that, like, let me DIY it myself as best I can first.
mm,
and I
absolutely.
really don't think it's a mistake that a lot of very successful filmmakers and artists now were sort of uh, no
Hmm.
budget. I wouldn't even say low budget, no budget filmmakers, DIY filmmakers. A lot of them from the horror genre, because it is such a creative genre, and there really is no
Right.
boundaries. I mean, did you have any formal training? Did you Stan Winston or Tom Savini or anything, or were you sort of just cultivating, on
I went
experiences?
to the no longer in existence Art Institute of Pittsburgh. Um, So I got a traditional degree that had a focus in this, but it also gave a broader range of art. So it was industrial design. It was the end of the '90s, so it was very early AutoCAD. The
Yeah.
baby steps of then Form Z, what eventually became ZBrush. A lot of Photoshop. So it gave me a wider skill set, so that if this didn't work out, I had room to go other places. They had a huge automotive track for people, in car design and car creation.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I stayed on this track. So I got that for a couple years, and then came out, and then it was more hands-on, practical. Let me just sit in my parents' garage, make a mess, and try and work things out.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of people that. What were your kind of parents like? Were they very kind of supportive when you were trying to do your own thing and make those mistakes and that mess in the garage?
Yeah, I mean, as supportive as you could want for the weird art kid. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Oh, that's very cool, man.
Did you ever practice on your
Did I what?
parents? Did you ever practice on your
No, I never
parents?
did. My
No.
three best friends at the time, it was just their face on repeat over and over. I just
Yeah.
over like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Okay, here we go again.
At that point, was it? Did you ever like? Obviously, putting makeup and doing scars and all sorts of things. When was the kind of first time? Might be later in your career, but when was the first time you started to design like bigger pieces and creatures and collaborate that way? What was the kind of first monster, effectively?
I mean, that would have been on those same three friends of mine. They endured a lot of glue and a lot of rubber pieces. Um, I think the first full prosthetic I ever did was my own face upside down, and in my head it was amazing, but it was absolutely abysmal. Um, I was a rudimentary sculptor at best. It was the first piece I ever did. I learned a ton from it. And then the next thing I did was just it only would only have worked in a photo. It was a windblown gag where my face was totally blown to this way, and I made a tie and a coat with wires in them so I could have them just hanging off to the side.
Oh.
So it was I had a lot of fun with this kind of visual trickery like that, and then I started moving into actual, like, okay, well, now I need to learn how to make a face that can actually perform and move and do things, not just for a fun sight gag.
Yeah. So, what was that? Because obviously with having friends that are very supportive, and like Ian and I, who've got collaborators and friends that are happy to be on camera, like my wife, and we do test shoots and all
Hmm.
sorts of stuff. And she's like, "Oh, do we have to do this? Do we have to do this?" Obviously, there's a lot of creative freedom with having people that are supportive. When you started to work in television and film, obviously you have that almost reality check of, oh no, this is the role I'm being asked to do, this is what I'm working on. What was that like, having that? Not maybe it was a little bit more free, but what
Hmm.
was that like to go, oh right, okay, this is very specific and there's
Mhm.
not as much freedom because I've not built my career? What was that kind of experience like?
I mean, honestly, the early stuff I did have that kind of freedom because they were getting me for dirt cheap. So it was just kind of like, well, you're the expert
Mhm.
here. We've got
Right.
$25 and a bag of fruit snacks. Will you come and do it? Um, so it was like, yeah, and it
Yeah.
would be kind of like just playing around, like, well, how's this? Well, that's great because it's free and you've done it and we can put it on camera. Then when
Yeah.
Cool.
when they projects started getting a little bit bigger, when I first opened my shop, they were still micro budget shoestring things, but it went from a crew of 3 people to a crew of, say, 15 people, and while still
Mhm.
small amounts, actual money was being spent on everyone, and it'd be like, okay, well, here's what the script says. What are you bringing to it? What's your insight into how this should look? Which more often than not is still the case. It's the very rare project where it's, here's exactly what you're making, and this is it. Just give us this. It happens, and
Yeah.
especially on studio driven projects where that concept art has been in existence
Sure.
for before the script was even written. Sometimes, um,
Yeah.
but more often than not, it's still collaboration based. Um, and the director and the writers coming to you and saying, okay, well, here's what we've put on the table. What do you have?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
It's interesting to and you know because you know I've got to reference Rick Baker's Halloween. Have you seen his
My
Halloween?
God.
What he did at Halloween?
I mean, this year, last year,
It's a masterpiece. This year was a
I
masterpiece.
don't think
Yeah,
anyone, if I could enjoy retirement a tenth of how much he seems to be, I will die happy.
yeah. Well, that's it. The reason I bring him up, obviously, he's a legend of the game, and it's and what was really kind of disheartening to hear is obviously he's worked on
The
massive
biggest. Yeah.
projects. Is the level of interference? So obviously, there's no like we're not kind of seeking out anything, finding that information out. But is there a point where have you had those experiences where obviously collaborate very closely with the director and the writers and producers where there has been pushback on design more than anything else?
I mean, it's happened, where I've thought we had a great idea and everyone's been happy, and then it goes a little further up the chain to the studio level, and
Yeah,
pushback comes like, no, no, let's scale it back. We need to go back to where we were. So it does happen, and of course, it's disheartening because sometimes it's even the director is in your corner like, no, I love this new vision, but it's director is even the
yeah,
director is sometimes a hired gun, and they've got to abide by the studio mandate. So, but even
yeah,
still, at the
absolutely.
end of the day, you're still getting to make amazing art. So, there's always something to take away from it. I've never been like, well, that was miserable, like, anything like that, where just because it wasn't necessarily exactly what I wanted to make.
Yeah, and that's it. It's kind of like it's developing your awareness of how the studio system, the works with bigger productions and bigger studios and bigger personalities. What was your kind of in terms of because we could harp on a lot about what you've worked on, and we obviously will touch on certain properties. What's your kind of earliest kind of mile marker where if you were to show someone some of your earlier work that you'd be most proud of?
Um, in the well, yeah, right in the mid 2000s, I did a great slasher flick, just indie slasher flick called Blood Night, which at the time and still I was like, that's one of the fewer early ones I could still watch and hold my head up, like, yeah, yeah, we did some cool stuff. Um,
Yeah,
local filmmakers, a guy named Frank Sabatella out of New York, an all local crew. Um, you know, some actors you might recognize a face or two and maybe even a name or two from the horror genre, but you know, no major stars. Actually, Billy Magnuson came out of that film. He grew up to be a pretty big name out there, but he we say he was our Kevin Bacon. Um,
yeah,
but uh, but yeah,
yeah,
that was one of the earlier ones that I can still really watch. I mean, I love all of them. We went through last summer. We were in the shop working, and we were just like, all right, bring in your earliest ones. Let's rag on each other, like, and just having
Oh,
a
cool.
blast, just watching all our earliest schlock fests, and we love those
yeah,
almost more, sometimes legitimately more than the bigger name stuff, just because
Absolutely.
it's all there, and you can say, oh, that was the day this happened and that happened, and it's they'll always be fun.
yeah. Because I was watching. I'm just gonna find this film I was watching the other night because my wife because we do this we try and find 80s obviously is a massive thing for myself personally and for you two guys as well. She found this film called Dead and Buried, and I didn't realize Stan Winston had anything to do with it. And it was because I'm a huge John Carpenter
Hmm.
fan, and like Stephen King's Small Town, horror and Salem's Lot, and all sorts of stuff like that. And discovering kind of like a new to me older films and those effects. So have you kind of is there a point where how am I trying to say? Is there a point where you kind of do you reference kind of certain what kind of research process do you go through? Because even like the way that film's shot for me is like I'm like thinking about my documentary and how I can edit certain
Hmm.
things, and I like how that was put together. What do you kind of do research, or is it more you start to kind of design things and draw out ideas? How does that work for you?
Yeah, that's generally where I start. With whatever. more often than not, there's a nugget of something on the page. Even even the ones where it's left completely in the dark, like, and then we see the scariest thing you've ever seen. There's still within the pages
Yeah,
surrounding. There's a nugget of something to grab from. Like, okay, well, there's claw marks, so it's that. There's what? There's the sound of a tail dragging, so it's that. So just trying to piece out what the director and writer might have had in their head. Um, whether that's through a series of sketches or Photoshop designs or just having conversations with them, just chatting it out back and forth until we suss out an idea and go to a design from there. Um, yeah, I mean, on rare occasion, they'll say like, "Well, we're shooting for this aesthetic," and they'll give a movie that truly inspired them. I mean, we did, an entire season of American Horror Story that way, just based on Ryan Murphy had cruising in his head, and
yeah,
that was
yeah,
the whole season 11 of American Horror Story was vibing on that. Sometimes with like scene specific references, like just some obscure stuff from it. Like, okay, we're doing that shot, and like, I mean,
Wild.
we did that on Evil as well. We did the iconic shot from The Exorcist of Father Merrin showing up, except we did it with a psychiatrist. Like,
oh,
it's yeah,
so good.
that kind of stuff is a
It's the
blast.
for me. It's yeah, that for me is, and obviously for makeup, and just because it is one of the best films ever made, and it's probably for me the best shot in horror, purely for iconic status. It's it kind of swirls around my head because I just watched Exorcist 3 recently and
Which I love.
absolutely loved
Mhm.
that. I loved it.
Whoa.
I watched the Legion cut with Brad Dourif, and he's obviously an icon as
I
well.
didn't know there was a different cut.
So
I will have to find that.
yeah, so there's the chap that I think it's Miller. I think it's Robert Patrick's, not Robert Patrick. The chap from Lost Boys, one of the older brother.
Mhm.
His Jason Miller, the actor that played
Yep,
the father that fell down the stairs. I think he
Paris.
filmed some scenes, and then I think he passed away.
Yes,
And then Brad Dourif, they filmed this whole thing. There's this huge scenes with Brad Dourif in the cell. That's just him, and they've just replaced all those scenes. So that's the Legion cut. It's definitely worth seeking out.
absolutely.
Mm.
One of the reasons I mentioned about doing the research was your work on. I know it's uncredited, and I'm not sure how extensive your work was on it. With Chernobyl Diaries, did you do any? Was any research done on like radiation, or how does that work?
I mean, in that case, it's no. Like, that was not my film. I went down with a couple other East Coast artists. We went down for a day of extensive reshoots. It was something like an 18-hour day, and I think we shot 3 or 4
Whoa.
alternate endings. But that was all the brilliant work and designs of
Oh
Neil
wow!
Gorton. We were just matching his designs with his pieces. He was unavailable to come out and do the reshoots, so we were just building off what he had done. And when you see the film, I think it's so dark you can't see any of what we did anyway, but it happens plenty.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's yeah. I actually quite enjoyed that flick because it's quite terrifying, that whole in especially in Ukraine. Um, but yeah, it's how do you go from something like that, and how does that work with? Do you get a call from a friend? Come down, we need you now, and how much time do you have in advance? And how do you work out what you need to take? Is everything on set? How does that work?
I mean, utilizing that specific case, yeah, that was a friend just like, hey, are you available in 2 days to fly on down? I'm driving down tomorrow morning. I'm bringing everything. The prosthetics are
Wow.
being brought in from Neil's shop. Like, that all came together and happened very, very fast, which is not uncommon in the film industry. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
we did a series of insert shots and not reshoots, but additional footage for Smile, which we got the call one day, and a week and a half later we were shooting it, and then 2 months later the
Wild.
movie comes out. Like, it was
Yeah. Yeah. It's I love to hear that stuff too because it's I think for a lot of young filmmakers, and even
Yeah.
still including myself, you think because they have the studio, because they have a budget, that everything is how
Mhm.
it should be and is running fantastic. And you actually get on the set and you hear stuff like this where you're like, no, 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 like we were still editing in August when the movie's coming out in October, and you call and you're shooting again, and they already have a pre-existing deadline that you just have to hit. So everybody has to. Yeah, that's awesome. Do you do you bid on projects? Like, does that come out and you say, like, I think I would want to do something, or my interpretation of this, and you can put a bid in? Or do they like, how does that work sort of for you for getting
It depends
jobs?
on the project. If you're coming in as a stranger, then yes, it's you've sent me the script, I've read the script, I've signed my NDA, I've done all that. Here's my breakdown. I've chatted with the director or the writer and producers, whoever is necessary, and here's what I'm offering. Here's what it'll cost. But if it's someone you've worked with in the past, it's kind of like, hey, we'd love to have you come on board. I've been lucky to have a good amount of both. And as far as TV goes, because it's rare to have every script in hand before you even start there, it's just a matter of, okay, this UPM is familiar with me, or these producers are familiar with me. They like my work. They know I'm not going to, drag them over the coals as far as budget goes. So they'll invite me onto the series, and there might not be very much in as it goes along, or there might be a ton and it's the most expensive show they've ever run. Sometimes there's generally a sense of where it's going to go, but Horror Story is one in particular where a lot of very big, very expensive surprises came up out of nowhere, and it's like, yes, we can, but here's what it's going to cost.
Yeah. And obviously, with a team on such a fantastic show, how are they almost prepared for that to happen?
And I think in that world, yes, Ryan Murphy world, they know what they're asking for. It's not a surprise to them anymore. Like they recognize what they're dealing with whenever they have big requests like that. They expect they're shooting big, so they know to go big.
So no, exactly, yeah, because you've got to have a lot of headroom to be able to kind of look out for those unknown things and those potential reshoots and that. So I just kind of want to just talk about Parker Finn and how you kind of met him. How did was it on Smile? Was it before that?
I met him for the first Smile. That was the first time our paths crossed. I was recommended by a producer coming off the heels of a film called Goodnight Mommy for Amazon, the remake of that. We had done a creature for that, and one producer knew another producer, so my name got thrown in. I talked to them for a couple months before it solidified into a job. So yeah, there was a lot of jumping around for that one, and some very good conversations early on with Parker. We hit it off well. I've told this story in other interviews. The first conversation we had, we just talked horror. Like, we barely talked about his movie until towards the end. It was like, oh yeah, we should circle around to the stuff we might be making. And then coming in for the second one, he was very happy with everything we did. The first one was obviously a lot, there was a lot less, but he was still very happy. They all the things we did build got their big shining moments on screen. And then for the sequel, the original strike came. The original script came. We got the locked script that was written before the strike, before the writer's strike. So that's where all the original conversation started, knowing that there wouldn't be able to be any revisions or drafts until everything had sorted itself out. So early conversations were slow. It was like, hey, we got this, but a lot of this might change, it might not change, but the heart of it was all there. So got to build off some ideas from that. And then when the strike lifted, when everything was settled, everything just kind of hit the ground running. He took some time and did a steady revision. Then obviously there was back and forth notes, whatever happens in their world between he and Paramount. But then when we were actually finally able to start working, pretty much what was written is what wound up on screen, with minor exceptions and minor changes. But yeah,
was it? It's please correct me if I'm wrong. But was Smile originally intended for Paramount Plus?
That's correct.
But then, at what stage was it was it during production, or was it after the executives had seen the film that the decision to?
It was well into post that I guess they finally got a peek at it and were blown away. And we're like, nope, we're sending this out theatrical.
Yeah.
They stuck the first trailer in front of Top Gun 2, which is like the biggest placement we could have ever dreamed of.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was it was a little streaming film, and with a little streaming film's budget and stage, and everyone loved it, and we were all working our hearts out. But yeah, I'm sure in his heart of hearts he hoped, but I don't think even Parker knew it was going to blow up the way it did.
That's it.
I mean, you had said about Terrifiers having their moment, and absolutely, but I mean, for you guys, again, and I saw was it Laura Hasn't Slept?
Laura Hasn't Slept, yeah.
Or Laura, the short. Yeah, so I saw it at Fantastic Fest before Dark and the Wicked, which I really wanted to see, which I love, and completely blown away. I didn't know who Parker was. I mean, he hadn't really done a lot, at least that was available, that I had seen. And then, of course, just being a huge horror nerd and following it, seeing that the budget of what the first movie was, knowing that it was going to be on streaming only. And I guess, obviously going into the movie, you knew that this was going to be for streaming. Like, there wasn't even a conversation to then, have the trailer be at Top Gun. Then the marketing that they did, especially for the first one, putting those people everywhere. I mean, the second one, people knew what was going on. So a lot of people were like, "Did you see this person?" People were like, "Oh, that's for Smile 2." But the first one, it was just brilliant. And then to do the numbers that it did, I mean, what a moment for everybody in that film. I mean, Parker, but you guys, everything you did, I mean, it really set the stage, and she was fantastic. I mean, everybody, it really, it's funny to think about those and how it would have, I mean, it wouldn't have died on streaming, but it absolutely wouldn't have gone to where it would have been. Who knows if there would have been a sequel, at that point. Wow, that's amazing.
Was it no, go ahead.
The trajectory he had from just going from, I made this creepy ass short film, to now I've got a studio film greenlit, to, oh, now it's a theatrically released studio film. Oh, now it's a franchise. Like, just for all of that to have happened in the short amount of time it happened, it's just a testament to how good he is.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think in terms of what you kind of from your work and his, it's just it seems like the collaboration has kind of really worked so well in so many levels, and obviously the casting of Naomi in the sequel is a stroke of genius. She's terrific in pretty much everything she's done. Just to take it back to kind of Parker a little bit, what were those? Was there anything specific that you knew I'm going to love working with him, like in terms of certain movies or certain effects? What were those? So obviously, you talked about horror. Was there anything specific that you both really kind of connected on?
I remember a lot of talk about the Evil Dead. That first conversation is going back to summer of 2021, so it's a while ago. But no, like past horror, it was really a mutual love of horror. I could recognize that he was a very talented writer and filmmaker from Go. Getting to set with him, made that even clearer. He has a very, very precise vision of what he wants in his head, which is above. I mean, it can be frustrating when you're trying to figure it out and you're not getting him what he wants. But then when it clicks, you're like, oh, okay, got it. And everything just kind of keys in and zeroes in, and it's there.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
When
having
go ahead.
Having him be so sharp with knowing a lot of that, was there a lot of opportunity for him though to say, like, this is exactly what I want written, but please do what you do, as a master of what you do, to bring that, like, that collaboration? Was there a lot of that? Did he kind of open it up for you in both movies to sort of, you read the script and say, okay, I'm gonna, like, obviously the weight scene, we don't have to say any spoilers or whatever, but, reading that, and I actually read the interview that I think with Backstage that you talked about that, and, what a scene, of course. And, so when you're reading that and talking with him, I'm sure, he wrote it, he has an idea about it, but you as the person who has done maybe not something like that specifically, but you live in that world yourself all the time, which is amazing. I love it. Was that something where you go, okay, this is how I think we can do it, and let's play and dance with that? Or was he more of like, I want, what was the collaboration around, sort of those moments?
I mean, he was very open to ideas and where our inspiration would come from. That was one of two gags that came with some art in place. So there was a jumping off point that, and of course, the entity at the end always has absolutely stunning paintings. Um, but yeah, that was the
Cool.
one moment in the script that had a couple beats of here's a jumping off point. So that was fun because it was just some sketchy stuff, and then Lucas got cast, and they were keyed in a little bit more. But then it was back and forth sculptures. We did a couple iterations just trying to get it right and make sure the visual story in his face tracked from beat to beat to beat, because it was all done at different times. Obviously, we didn't put him through 10 hours of makeup in a single day, like, and it was just a locked off shot. Sometimes him on set, sometimes him in front of a green screen, and just matching all that and tracking the blood flowing down his chest in the different instances.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first one we shot was the heaviest version of it, just the final stage of it. And then the first stage, and then weeks later we came back and did the middle stage.
Crazy. Wow,
it's incredible.
Filmmaking. So do you have you, like, what's the, with technology now, do you love sort of mixing practical and visual and and CGI, like, because it's incredible now, with what they can do, obviously, and that was interesting when we were talking with Josh about Terrifier, because those movies are advertised as practical horror effects, and he's like, my job is to not make it be noticed at all. So it's sort of like a backhand, and I loved, the little visual effects that I do. I loved looking through your Instagram and seeing a lot of the applications and that you do that has, sort of the green screen or the, the green areas, because that they're going to, keying those out. And how has that sort of changed as your career has gone along? Because of course technology has really changed in the last, 10-15 years.
I mean, it's a substantial part of every conversation with every gag, because now it's pretty much all of it has a line. Okay, what are we handling practically on the day? What's going to be a visual effects? What's going to be a blend?
Right.
So film and TV, that's pretty much. And sometimes it'll be okay. Well, this one's completely practical, or this one's completely visual. But the ones that are the most fun are the blends, because then it's just the best tools in the toolbox to give you the most impactful scare.
Cool.
That same weight plate one, we knew going in, like, okay, we're going to do things to him we can't actually do to an actor. We've got to remove things from him. So there's going to be a line, so on set he had elements painted green, or inside his mouth we knew things were going to be added in there. So things like that, where in advance and it's planned that way, that's the most, because then it's like even a surprise for me. The first time I'm going to see it is in an early edit, or sometimes not even till it's up on screen. So it's great. It's like, oh wow,
Amazing.
like I've been looking at the same photo for months of how it looked from what we did, but there's the finished work finally. So it's really cool to see that all blend together. There's always VFX is better, practical is better, but it's 2024. You're gonna have VFX. There's no. It's just one of the tools in the box. The trick is to balance it all out, because I think audiences do get sick of seeing an infinite army of rubber-looking people, because they're all there's no physics CG. But at the same time, visual effects can dramatically improve some of what we do practically. So long as it's all being balanced out, I think you're doing it right.
Cool.
Yeah, just to kind of give you some props, and I sent you this message the other day that obviously we're going to post this after the date we talked about,
right.
To kind of clear any kind of spoiler issues or anything like that. But the chap that I think he breaks his own jaw in Smile 2, and then I've got to say it looks incredible. Obviously sound design is such a key thing for something like that, and self mutilation such a if you get it right, it looks amazing, especially like Terrifier or whatever. But when I showed my wife, I don't think Ian knows this, I showed my wife that photograph of the close up. It kind of reminded me about certain shots I'd seen in The Thing, with how the jaws and the heads and everything on the table, and the amount of detail. I'll show a post of your account on when we post this video. The amount of detail that goes into that is unreal. Obviously, you don't necessarily know. Do you know what the lighting is going to be like on a scene like that when you start doing the designs?
Sometimes, not that early, but certainly, once we've started shooting, and then we can account for things with color. But sometimes we get the luxury of, okay, this is going to be dark, this is going to be blue, this is going to be, this is a shadow monster, so we're going to work with that. So you have to sometimes oversculpt it so that details will pop out in the little bit of light it is getting. So it's always great when you can find those things out in advance. But no, that I would say that is a scarce luxury.
Do you is it so depending on that depending on the level of production, what the lighting scenario is there a kind of an average fidelity point of what it's going to look like and how much effort and time goes into something?
I mean, we always build it with the assumption that you're going to see it from any angle in any lighting situation, because you don't know, and it could change, and you don't want to be like, well, you can't change because of us. Like, you never want to be stuck in that position on the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes it is, there are gags that are structured in such a incredibly specific way, and that's how they're planned out, that no, sometimes you can't change it. If you like a tabletop gag where you have tubes running through the bottom of it and orchestrated into the walls, like literally our first sequence, we had tubes running the opening of the film. There's a guy that gets shot on the couch, the Russian gangster. We had tubes running through a prosthetic, behind him, through the couch, up the wall, and into the roof where the practical effects guys were pumping the blood. Like, obviously, that's not one we can change rapidly on the day. That was planned out well in advance.
Yeah.
But other things you want to be as malleable as you can, which sometimes requires a lot of overbuilding, and you're doing more than you ever need, or you wind up doing, 20, 30 takes for something that's on screen for a flash, but that's just all part and parcel.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, and it's the level of detail on that. I just basically I zoomed in onto the photo. I just put it to my wife's face as quickly as possible, saying, "What do you think of this?" It completely freaked her out. I said, "You've seen that, and I'm going to speak to the chap that designed that." So it really freaked her out. So the work is astounding, and I think that the second film, especially for me, I think it was obviously the cast in the original film. It really is effective, and I think it came out. I might be wrong about this. Is this around the same time as Barbarian as well? So there was a real nice. It's a real nice moment where there's two great films to kind of sink your teeth into that had their own lore. Like with Art the Clown now with Terrifier, he's so iconic. And in the UK, at least here,
here as
there
well,
was Terrifier 3, The Substance, and Smile 2. And it was like, I was just like on sugar watching these films because I watched them within the space of as tight as possible. And, I didn't want spoilers or anything like that because that can, there's so much kind of spoiler stuff that goes out straight away. And for me, the lead in Terrifier 3, and especially Naomi, I think that just the whole film just was such a giant step. And, one thing I'd love to ask Parker about is how he cast people with their smile. So if I get the opportunity to speak to him in the future, I want to ask him about that. But do you have any kind of favorite moments or scenes that you were less involved in from Smile 2?
I mean, because of how much movie there is past the scary beats, there was a lot I wasn't involved in. And Sasha Grossman, the straight makeup head, who's a wonderful dear friend of mine. We've done a bunch of projects together at this point. She gets to tell her own visual story of Naomi's character throughout the film. I'm giving, you see the scars she's got and things like that. Like, I designed those, but that's such a small piece. Like, her day-to-day look as she just falls apart, and the same she did with Sosie Bacon in
Oh
the
my
first
god,
one.
yeah,
It
yeah,
the
Yeah.
continuity she tracked just blows me away because she tells such an impressive story. And then with the second one, that look coupled with all the over the top glam pop star looks, it was
yeah,
so much to do. Like it's such an impressive little cohesive a bit of work just on one character in one film.
yeah. And what was her name again?
Sasha Grossman.
So in terms of like the actor in the first one, how progressively ill she
Mm-hmm.
started to look, and with Naomi's look of the makeup running her face, and when she left the the flat with her mother. That's all I'll say for that, because that's a monumental, that's a beautiful scene. And when you do such a interesting scene, shall we say, in the hotel room, and the two of them are absolutely brilliant together as
Yeah.
a mother and daughter. How obviously, you, if you've got so much blood or effects in a scene, do you have the opportunity and the luxury to do it more than
Oh
once,
yeah.
or how many kind of on a scene like that, how many kind of cameras and how many opportunities do you get to get that exactly how Parker wants it?
Until he gets what he wants. I mean, that's it. There was no, I
Cool.
don't think there was any occasion where we're like, okay, we can only do this 3 times. And knowing that's not the way he works, any gags we built were designed, because sometimes that will be the case. We're like, okay, well, here's the gag you've wanted. We're going to build 3 exploding
Yeah,
heads. So, and you get three
Yeah.
three shots at it. I know that's not how Parker works, so I'm not going to design a gag that is that kind of limited. So, for example, the cameo I got to do myself pulling my jaw off. Um,
Sweet.
oh
like
yeah,
I knew he was going to want to reset that a bunch of times and just do it. So I had to figure out a way. Okay, what can I do to make this so it's not a 20-minute reset, so the entire crew isn't stopped waiting on
yeah,
me over and over. And basically, we got it down to a less than a minute of a reset. We're just washing off the blood,
wow,
slapping the
Wow.
jaw back into place. It was built like a puzzle piece, so it slips right in. All the little bits of
Wow.
glue each have their own little home inside, and just making sure the blood is off. Give them a quick pat down and do it again. Um, some of the
Wow.
bigger set pieces, the extensive oneers that were in the film, those are obviously longer
Yeah.
resets, but even still, those were designed to be done as many times as we needed to do them. The opening oneer, I think we did maybe 4 times when all was said and done. Um,
Okay.
so not a lot. I mean, and each an hour and a half reset between each time. Each time we reset it, it got a
Yeah.
little quicker just because we all know exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
Um, the other one are in the hospital room. That was a longer reset because there was a lot more complicated gags going on there, between
yeah,
blood appearing out of nowhere and things like that. And just the tricks that were devised by every department are, pardon my, they're fucking brilliant. Like just
yeah.
Nice.
They really
like
are.
we had like
It
secret
is.
panels in doors. So like the camera pans up onto her face, and below that is a hand sticking through a hole, changing things up and doing things to her, and then it pans back down. And like this is
Wow.
happening. It is a magic trick. It is a on screen. I just do the trick.
Yeah, what's that? What from your point of view and being on set for everything you need to work on? Because I'm just looking at I didn't recognize the name before, but Charlie Saroff and Parker working together.
Mhm.
What's that like in terms of seeing that kind of magic happening? And the reason I say magic, for anyone that's not seen Smile 2, the cinematography is
It's
unreal in
stunning.
this
Yeah.
film. It's a work of art in
Right.
itself. There's so many elements to this film. That's why it works so well. So, what's that kind of like to see someone else collaborating in a completely different way? Are you learning about more about how to be more efficient with what you do around the cinematographer and
Mm.
director as well?
I mean, by the time it gets to set, it's in most cases, especially with the effects pieces and those moments, known what we're going to shoot and how we're going to shoot it. Um, there were very few surprises in that regard. So most of that was planned
Yeah,
out long in advance. Like some of the earliest meetings, the oneers were in the works for months before getting to set, and would have
yeah,
their own meetings. Like, okay, this is the Warner meeting. Like, this is meeting for this one scene. We'll spend 2 or 3 hours in. But they had an amazing collaboration, and a lot of that was I have to assume, well before anything happened, like, because they're coming in pretty much knowing the shots they want to get. He's got that in his head already of how we're doing it.
Yeah.
The only time anything came up where it affected my world is we had a brief chat with this will be a spoiler, the mom, when she's stabbing herself. She ultimately stabs herself in the eye. We did art of the other side, and we, that was the way we were going. So on the morning, we did it on her left side, and then we sent photos over. And Parker, I get an oh no, and he comes into the trailer. He's like, hey, what do we do if I want to shoot the other side? Because that's what's in my head. And I saw him like, well, I could move the camera, we could do this, and we could. And me and Jared Baylog, the artist who was helping me out that day, were like, look, whatever, you're never going to be happy if we don't give it the way that's in your head. So give us a little bit of time. We'll take this off. We'll put it the way you want it, because we don't want you sacrificing it. We also don't want to have to come back in a month to redo all of it, because we know what he wants, and it's nice to have that, like to just have that definitive vision that you can run with.
Yeah, because there's no way you could play possibly, but there's no way you could shoot a film like that without that level of planning, that level of detail, because it is so powerful. And like, it's not one of those things. And how editing process or an effect, how it makes if it works very well, you don't see the scenes, you don't see how it works, not thinking about the process. And there's some film language going on in Smile 2 that's, I thought, oh, is this going to affect how I think about the film? I think about the cinematography. No, it absolutely complements everything that's going on. So, props to the team for that, and and for everyone involved, really, because I really enjoyed it. My favorite moment. The reason I asked you about the favorite moment that's not necessarily with your team is it's the corridor scene with the dancers, the performers on stage with the mirrors.
That was terrifying.
The reason I love that so much, I love it so much, because it reminds me of that one of the final shots in The Mouth of Madness with Sam Neill,
running down the hallway,
because it's all those reflective black surfaces, and it's like, wow, my brain went there, and it was like someone was reading into my mind what I liked from horror. And performances like Jack Nicholson's son, and his smile, and the way he's walking. It's not even the smile; it's the way people are walking. I think it works so well, because you can have something that someone smacking their own head in with a with a weight, and then if you've got something that, because in a lot of horror films now, if someone moves inorganically, or some counter to how a normal human walks, it can be quite effective. But yeah, that's definitely my favorite moment in the film. That's not like effects or makeup.
It's such a beautiful
I would completely agree with that. And because it has nothing from my world, so I wasn't there on set for it, so it was a genuine surprise. Like, I read it on the page, of course, but had no concept of what it was going to look like till I saw it on screen, and it was legitimately terrifying. So yeah, I would have to agree.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Do you? I wanted to ask. Do you have a couple quick questions? Doing especially a lot of horror, and with Evil, and you've done 40 plus episodes. There's a lot of work. Are you reusing a lot of gags? Do you create specific? Do you reuse through projects? You're like, oh, I have this from a movie or a TV show that I did before. Do you like, oh, we don't need to cast that head again because we have a head, we have, and then do you have a go-to blood recipe that you like, or is there a lot of specific talk about blood? And
Ian's asking your secrets, basically. He wants to know your secrets.
I'll start with that one, and I'll break some hearts. My favorite blood recipe is one I purchased now. It's from a company called PPI named Fleet Street. And it's just got a brilliant color. It works well on every material I use. The blood recipe I used and made for the first 15 years of my career, it was great, but they're working with stuff that I don't have access to, and that's still all skin safe and good for actors. So, and then it's consistent every time. So that's mostly my go-to. The first question, yes, so long as it's not a not a hero gag, but if there's a situation where something from a vast library of molds can be repurposed or reused, yeah, we'll do that sometimes. Not in secret, but
Cool.
especially with trauma stuff. I've got a collection of 500 different cuts and stuff molds like that.
Yeah.
Some of those are it's just you paint it differently on a different actor and it's a different makeup. Creature and
Cool.
character makeups, it's a little harder to do something like that with because they are so visually specific.
Sure.
But I have
Wow.
body molds, things
Yeah.
like that can be reused and repurposed. Well, okay, this time the torso has its heart pulled out. Now it has its intestines pulled out. You can use the same torso out of the same mold for that. Sure.
Cool.
What's the largest kind of monster piece you've worked on?
I mean, that would have to
What's the kind of
be
like
that's the stuff for Evil, where I was working for Joel Harlow's Morphology. Those creatures were, I mean, the last one we
Yeah.
did for the last 3 episodes was this 7.5 foot tall, just massive creature dragging 3 bodies behind it, just decorated from head to toe with
yeah.
skulls and hooks and heads, and it was every ridiculous thing you could have ever wanted on a single monster. It was, I mean, everything on that show,
Is
just over the course of the 4 seasons, just ratcheted up and up and up and up, and that show was just a dream.
Amazing.
is that the
Yeah.
kind of thing that is that the kind of most fun you have is when you do the kind of the scale stuff, the big stuff?
I mean, monsters in general will always be my favorite in any kind of them, any
Yeah.
version of them. So yeah, the bigger the monster, the more fun it is. I mean, the more work it entails. That one monster on Evil had 4 of us running around it at all times, wrangling every piece of it, and keeping our actor
Wow.
Fedor safe inside. And just there's little downtime when a monster is that big, but it's when it's all up there on screen and translates, it's absolutely worth every instant of it.
And what's the piece that's over your left shoulder? Over your left shoulder, the big eyes.
Oh, that
What's that?
that's just a silly alien from a commercial a couple of years back from the show Ancient Aliens on what is that, History Channel. We did
Yeah.
we did a
Yeah.
we did a commercial with a bunch of senior citizen aliens at a nursing home. Was just a really
That's
fun
awesome.
gag.
That's very cool, man. And yeah, Jeremy, before we go, I wanted to thank you for just allowing us to have this chat because it's so much fun for us. And from, clearing up kind of misconceptions about the work and like especially when we chatted to the team on Terrifier, it's nice to speak to people and, because obviously you get thanks from the filmmakers and, you might get some messages here and there from people that, are seeking that kind of advice and, want to get into the industry. But yeah, thank you so much. And one of the last things I want to ask you is, how did you come up with your Monster in the Closet shop name? Where did that come from?
Growing up, I was convinced I had a monster in my closet and under my bed and in the side
Yeah.
of my wall, but those didn't sound as good on a sticker. Yeah, that was
And
it.
yeah. And how do you obviously when did you kind of open the shop, and how many is it, just yourself, or what's your kind of team, and how do you bring new people into your team that you can rely on and trust? How does that work?
I opened the shop in 2003. Um, so
Wow.
yeah, we just celebrated our 21st anniversary in October, which is awesome.
Amazing.
As far as people I work with, I mean, it's trust. One of my dearest friends and closest artists is Brian Spears. We've now been working on. We came up as rivals just in the indie film industry, not rivals. That's but like he was
Yeah.
well known for it. I was well known for it, and like oh, Brian got that one. Like oh, um,
Yeah.
and like God, like so we do a bunch of stuff together. He's I call him my right hand man. Just all the things I forget, he's very good at remembering for me. Especially when we're juggling multiple projects. And just an absolutely incredible artist as well. But past that, it's just people you've worked with. It's knowing who brings what to the table, um, what their skill set is. Like I when I
Yeah.
bring on a project, and a lot of shops will be like, okay, that's my sculpting guy. Like, I like everyone to jump in. So, like, I'll sculpt for a couple hours, then I'll give it to Brian to sculpt for a couple hours. Then, depending on the size of the job, I might have another 3 or 4 people in the shop. All right, you take it for a bit, you take it for a bit, just get everyone's ideas in there. And like, that's how I like to run it. Like, I like it to be a collaboration of artists because everyone is seeing it differently. Everyone
Yeah.
brings their own unique skill set. And like, I don't need it to be, well, this was mine, so it's got to be all me. Like, no, I don't ever see it that way. Like, whatever artist can deliver it to the best degree to make it sing on screen, like, that's what I want.
Absolutely. And one last question from myself. What's your favorite monster or effect or makeup that's not yours? Something you've seen in the past or like years ago, and maybe it could be a friend's thing that someone that you know who's done. I know what mine is, but I'm not going to say that yet. So, what's your kind of favorite monster kind of makeup or creature? What's
I
your
mean,
kind of go to that?
I think my favorite makeup of all time would be Dick Smith's David Bowie age makeup in The Hunger.
Oh, honestly, that's on my notes. That's on my notes to talk about that because The Hunger is it's like almost feels forgotten, and it's like Tony Scott did such good work on it,
Mhm.
and the age makeup,
They're
probably the best that's ever been, I think.
I would agree with that, especially in an era before silicone, before actual translucent materials, to have it be as effective as it was. And yeah, and it still holds up now. What, 40 years later? Like, it's a
Yeah.
gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous piece of work. Um, as far as
Yeah,
monsters
I
go,
think Tony yeah, Monsters, well, yeah.
I think those have got to be the later Elm Street films, just because they were so over the top creative. And just like, it would, I would love to have been to known what those pitch meetings were like, and what those writers' rooms were like. Where it's like, okay, well, now he's a motorcycle, now he's a cockroach. Like, all right, like, because it
Yeah,
was just
yeah.
anything went, and they were so much fun and so well executed. That cockroach one, like, it's a silly scene, sure, but like, the work in it is stunning. Still, like, it's like,
Yeah. My personal favorite is probably in the first one. It's where Freddy comes through the wall.
mhm,
Absolutely obsessed with that shot, and you've seen it in like the Frighteners where they've done it through
yeah,
CG, and it just never hits the same. And it's like almost like the materials used it came through is great. But my personal favorite is obviously The Thing because I'm just obsessed with it.
of course.
But the work that it's like kind of a staple, isn't it?
Anything Rob
Ian,
Bottin
what would
has
you say?
done. Yeah.
Ian and I were involved in two horror festivals that I founded, and one of the judges that was came on board was Joe Alves, the production designer of Jaws, and he we talked extensively about his set because he was shooting a lot of second unit stuff, and some of it was uncredited, and there's certain shots in the film that are directed by him, and he started to get that like that bug
Mhm.
when he had that camera, when he had that kind of that something different instead of working on the problematic shark. It was shooting some second unit stuff, so maybe that'll change quickly when you do that. So that'll be we'll definitely be glued to that. But Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on board, and
My
thank you
pleasure.
for having the patience as well with all the technical the issues we had earlier.
Nah,
um
yeah, me too. I'm a Luddite. Sorry, if there's any technology, I will find a way to screw it up somehow. So to be able to, you know create artwork and bring it to life on film and help tell someone else's story, like, it's a legitimate honor. Like, it's not a privilege I take lightly.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeremy. And we might kind of reach out in the future, and if there's other, we'll keep an eye on what you're working on, and then
That'd be great.
we might ask for, just have a little chat about those things. And yeah, we'll release this in a couple of weeks, so we'll be clear of any
Great, great.
digital releases at Smile 2. So keep it simple. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us on the Creative Connection.
My pleasure.
And yeah, please keep making some gory ass things, and then I'll keep showing my wife in and scaring the hell out of us. So,
Okey-doke.
but Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It was great to talk to you both.